Focus my presentation in two areas. One, the importance of wildlife conservation and biodiversity conservation for development. And then I would like to take a development project done in Sri Lanka and go through why it is unsustainable when you don't consider these issues. So since the focus is on the sustainable development goals, there are 3 sustainable development goals that are directly related to wildlife conservation and biodiversity conservation. That is SDG 13, 14, and 15. They are the most relevant to the symbiosis between conservation and sustainable development. But most other goals are indirectly linked. We have to start off by realizing that development and biodiversity are intrinsically linked, but the relationship varies between the type of development and between development sectors. What I mean by that is certain development activities have one type of impact on biodiversity and wildlife, other development impacts. So based on the sectors, the impacts also change. While most attention might focus on the potential impacts of development activities on biodiversity, which is something that we all focus on, what are the impacts of this development on biodiversity? But most development activities are themselves dependent on biodiversity. The development activity cannot take place if there is no biodiversity in the country, right? And that dependence varies depending on the sector. Development also depends on biodiversity and ecosystem services as inputs to development activities, which means that any accessing and using these inputs can often have impacts on biodiversity and ecosystems, because development depends on this. Development activities have impacts on biodiversity and ecosystem services at outputs of development. So while we rely on biodiversity and ecosystem services as inputs to development activities, and development activities cannot take place without these inputs, the development activity also has adverse impacts on biodiversity as an output of development. So almost all development work will have some impacts on biodiversity. I'm pretty sure that you all are all familiar with ecosystem services, so I won't spend too much time going into detail of it. But basically, just to reiterate the fact that ecosystem services are services. These services are for the benefit of people. These are the services that people obtain from ecosystems. And looking at this chart, you will realize that there can be no development work done without one of these ecosystem services or a combination of these services. So therefore, ecosystem services are critical for development. Over the past 50 years, humans have changed ecosystems more rapidly and extensively than in any other comparable period of time in human history. That means over the last 50 years, we have degraded our ecosystem so much and changed our environment so much that if you take the entire recorded human history, we have not damaged our ecosystems as much as we have done over the last 50 years. This has resulted in substantial and largely irreversible losses in the diversity of life on Earth. So we have a huge challenge facing us. The challenge is for reversing the degradation of ecosystems. But while we are reversing the degradation, we must also meet the increasing demand for the ecosystem services for development. So we can't look at only one aspect of trying to protect our ecosystems from degradation, because we need to try to meet the demand. So how do we come to this balance? That is where sustainable development plays a role. When you really look at what biodiversity does, biodiversity influences ecosystem services. That is the benefits provided by ecosystems to humans that contribute to making human life both possible and worth living. So for humans to survive in this world, we need to use ecosystem services that makes human life possible and worth living. Biodiversity also boosts ecosystem productivity. That means the more diverse the ecosystem is, the more productive that ecosystem will be. And the more productive an ecosystem is, the more usefulness that ecosystem will have for development activities of man. So, however small, every species has an important role to play in an ecosystem. For example, a larger number of plant species means a greater variety of crops. Greater species diversity ensures natural sustainability for all life forms. Let me give you an example of making this link by taking the business sector, something that all of us are very familiar with. I'm trying to show you that you cannot do any type of manufacturing, transportation, or any type of business that we do in the world without having inputs that have an impact on biodiversity. Any type of business activity needs material inputs like metals, plastics, wood, etc. It needs electricity and fuel inputs. It needs water. It needs land use. So all these inputs have an adverse impact on biodiversity. Then we use these impacts, we use these resources as inputs to our business activities. And then as a result of business activities, in addition to the product that we are trying to manufacture, it results also in outputs that have also got a negative impact on biodiversity. Outputs such as emissions to the atmosphere, waste products, noise and vibration, and wastewater. So this clearly shows that any sector, and I can do this for all different development sectors, it will be the same. You will have inputs that depend on biodiversity, then you will have outputs that have an adverse impact on biodiversity. So development and biodiversity is intrinsically linked. Let's look at the situation in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has the highest biodiversity per unit area in Asia. It is considered a global biodiversity hotspot. And I have heard many bureaucrats and politicians very proudly talking about Sri Lanka being a global biodiversity hotspot. But that is nothing to be proud about. The fact that we have the highest biodiversity per unit area in Asia is something that we should be proud about. But being a global biodiversity hotspot states that our ecosystems are so threatened that it's a biodiversity hotspot. So we should not be very proud about it. We should be very concerned about the fact that Sri Lanka is a global biodiversity hotspot. And as I said earlier, higher the biodiversity, greater the ability for the provision of ecosystem services. So if more biodiversity, more diverse our biodiversity is, the greater ability for ecosystems to provide services, and those services are needed for development, then conservation of biodiversity and safeguarding ecosystems right now in Sri Lanka is a conservation priority. Shouldn't it be a development priority? Because you cannot develop without these inputs of biodiversity and ecosystem services. So therefore, conserving biodiversity and safeguarding ecosystems should really be part of government's development agenda. Because if you don't save these and protect it, development in the long term will not be possible. Now I'm going to share with you some data that has been collected by the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, when they did the IUCN red listing process in 2007. I'm giving you all data for a particular reason. In 2007, the IUCN red list identified that the IUCN red list is a list of threatened and endangered species in each country. The red list showed that 1/3 of Sri Lanka's inland vertebrate fauna and almost 2/3 of its flora are threatened. And about 33% of the threatened biodiversity is endemic to Sri Lanka, which means it is available only in Sri Lanka. 21 species of endemic amphibians have not been recorded during the past 100 years, which means that these species could for most purposes be considered extinct. So even as we speak, we are having species being extinct in our country. 1 in every 12 species of Sri Lanka's inland indigenous vertebrates is currently facing an immediate or extremely high risk of extinction in the wild. I think this warrants me to repeat that 1 in 12 species of Sri Lanka's inland indigenous vertebrates is currently facing an immediate or extremely high risk of extinction in the wild. And experts suggest that this trend will continue unless more systematic and stringent corrective measures are taken. So what is our conservation scorecard? How well do we do in conservation in Sri Lanka? The data that I showed you show that efforts in conservation are weak at best. The main reason for weak conservation is because of weak conservation governance. It's a critical factor for poor conservation outcomes. What do I mean by conservation governance? All of us are familiar with the economic mess Sri Lanka is in right now. Why have we got into this economic mess? Because of poor political governance and lack of accountability. It's the same situation when it comes to conservation. Because of political interference in the conservation programs in Sri Lanka and the lack of political will to actually do proper conservation in this country, conservation governance is very weak. Therefore, conservation outcomes are weak. And poor conservation outcomes result in a depletion of ecosystem services. So the more we have poor conservation governance and poor outcomes, the ecosystem services that we can provide will start reducing. If it starts reducing, it will have an impact on development of Sri Lanka. Unfortunately, the governments, and when I talk government, I'm talking about the governments over the last 30 years. All governments are very strong in their rhetoric on conservation. Their words and their speeches on conservation is very strong. But unfortunately, when governments come into power, actions don't match the rhetoric. So I showed you 2007 data to show, because it's 15 years almost since the IUCN Red List of 2007 came out. Little or no corrective measures have been taken by successive governments since then. So obviously, we are heading towards quite a disastrous situation if we don't watch it. Why is this? And how can we change this trend? If you look at why this is, first, lots of people say we don't have adequate policies or legislation in place. I have worked in several countries in all the countries in South Asia and several countries in East Asia. Also a couple of countries in Africa when I was in the World Bank. When you really look at the conservation policies and legislation that is in Sri Lanka, we are pretty advanced. Problem is, having good policies and legislation doesn't mean a thing if you don't implement those policies and implement the legislation. So our weakest link is implementation. That is why we are having such bad conservation outcomes. There is a lack, and the main reason for that is that there is a lack of political will and commitment to internalize biodiversity conservation into the development process. Politicians and policymakers feel that biodiversity is external to the development process. They don't understand the link that I just showed you earlier, that more biodiverse our ecosystems are, the stronger the ecosystem services that we can provide and greater the development potential. So because of that, because they don't understand that, they keep biodiversity outside the development process. Development agencies and sector development plans are developed in isolation from conservation agencies. When the sector development plans are done, like for example, if you take the power development plan or the road development plan or agriculture irrigation development plans, those sectors don't involve the conservation agencies during the planning process. They involve the conservation agencies only at the time of an environmental impact assessment. When the EIA is done, we try to get involved at that point. Unfortunately, at that point, it is too late to take corrective action. Why is that? If it is a private project, the EIA process is much more stringent in Sri Lanka than a government project. Unfortunately, the Central Environmental Authority is very weak when it comes to governance of government projects or government development projects. By the time the EIA is done, in most government development projects, the land has been allocated or purchased. Donor funds have been obtained for doing that project in this particular location. In some instances, presidents, prime ministers have gone and laid foundation stones when an EIA has not even been cleared. Basically, putting pressure on the Central Environmental Authority that you have to clear this EIA because the government has invested too much money and political capital on this project. So therefore, the conservation issues are not really addressed properly. So how can we change this? Because we can't go on like the way we are doing. The first thing we need to do is focus on awareness. Perceptions among politicians, policymakers, development agencies, and even among the general public are that conservation and development are contradictory objectives. They are not complementary. They are in conflict with each other. That perception must change, because I just showed you with data that the more biodiversity we have, the greater the ecosystem services we can provide, and you need those ecosystem services for development. That means conservation of biodiversity and development are not contradictory objectives, they are complementary objectives. Because ecosystem services are a prerequisite for development. Higher the ecosystem service provision, greater the opportunity for a country to develop. And greater the biodiversity in an ecosystem, the greater the potential for ecosystem service provisions. Therefore, once again, I would like to reiterate that biodiversity conservation should be a priority for Sri Lanka's development. More than conservation, it should be a development priority. Now, having made the links showing how important it is, let me show you how we do projects. Let me take for an example a project that I consider unsustainable development, classic example. And for the lack of time, I'm taking only one project, but I can take all large-scale development projects in Sri Lanka and do a similar analysis and show you why such development can be considered unsustainable. The government decided to provide an irrigation project by damming the Moragahakanda reservoir and providing some of that water that was not originally intended to come to the Minneria reservoir, but to send it to Minneria reservoir, so that after the EIA, this is after the EIA has been done. The EIA for Moragahakanda did not have any additional water released to Minneria other than the normal water flow that was coming into Minneria prior to the Moragahakanda project. The EIA was done on that. But subsequently, due to political priorities, Moragahakanda project, the focus was diverted a little that water should be filled into Minneria so that there can be more agriculture in Polonnaruwa district. You can join the dots and figure out how this happened. This happened during the Yahapalana government, so I don't need to tell you who was responsible. All of you all know who came from the Polonnaruwa district. So the project was then diverted water into Minneria reservoir so that water can be supplied to farmers in the Polonnaruwa area and downstream from Minneria for irrigation and agriculture. But Minneria was the grounds in the dry season. The Minneria reservoir was the grounds for what we call the Great Elephant Gathering in Minneria. During the dry season, from the months of May until October, there in Minneria, there is the coming together of a large number of elephants on the grasslands of the lake bed of Minneria reservoir. Elephants can be observed from May to October. The highlight is when there is 350 to 400 elephants, it can be observed during the months of August and September. Among the 13 Asian elephant range countries, there is no place in any of those range countries other than Minneria that you can see 350 to 400 elephants in one afternoon on the grasslands of a reservoir. So that became a huge tourist attraction. It became the best location in the world to observe such a large number of Asian elephants in one location in those 2 months. Right? It is also the best place to observe interesting elephant social behavior among Asian elephant range states. And it has become one of the premier tourist attractions to Sri Lanka. In fact, an international magazine called The Lonely Planet, which is a tourism magazine, identified the Great Elephant Gathering at Minneria as one of the 10 greatest wildlife wonders of the world. There were only 2 in Asia and 1 in Sri Lanka, and that was Minneria. So this has huge tourism potential. Let me, before I go into what the problems are, let me explain why elephants gather in the Min area grasslands. Elephants are coming to the Min area reservoir bed not because of water. A lot of people feel elephants are coming because of water during the dry season. Actually, the elephants are coming primarily for the grasslands. And why are the grasslands? What is so special about the grasslands in Min area? Every year, prior to the Moragahakanda project, every year, due to the northeast monsoon and water flow from streams and rivers into Min area, the lake bed, which is the grasslands of Min area, gets submerged in water. It gets full of water from November to March every year. During this period, there is no grasslands visible. Everything is underwater. But with the release of water in March, April for the Yala cultivation, the water starts receding and the grasslands that have been submerged start emerging. Now, having been underwater for 3 months or so, the grass is dead and new grass starts growing. And these grasslands are exposed continuously throughout the dry season from March, April until the end of October, when the monsoon rains come again and the reservoir bed gets submerged. Now, this cycle has been going on for several decades or more. We have records only of several decades, but I'm pretty sure it has been going on for several hundred years, right? But now human intervention changed this project, changed this phenomenon. The Moragahakanda project, like I started off saying, was not supposed to release water into Min area when you look at the environmental impact assessment of what the objectives of Moragahakanda project was. It was supposed to store water in Moragahakanda, and through a 28-kilometer long tunnel, it was supposed to take water to the Hurulu River, and from there to the cascade irrigation systems to go to northwestern and north central provinces. However, as we don't plan things well in Sri Lanka, the Moragahakanda reservoir project was completed in 2018 December, but the tunnel to take the water didn't even start construction until 2021 January. So there is no tunnel to take the water to Hurulu River. And then during the Yahapalane government, a decision was made, regardless to the tunnel, there is going to be a lot of water released to Min area for cultivation in Polonnaru district. So even with the tunnel, there will be still more water coming into Min area. And from Moragahakanda, they started releasing in 2019 water into Min area, commencing June and July in the dry season. When you start releasing water in the dry season, the grasslands obviously get submerged. So, and the water level water releases into Min area have been increasing every year. This slide shows you on the left-hand side where the dark shade is, that is the water levels in Min area during the dry season. The lighter areas are the grasslands that are exposed, and the darker green areas are the forests surrounding the Min area reservoir. So during the dry season, the water level recedes, exposing these grasslands. About 1,500 hectares of grasslands emerge, and the elephants come to eat the grass. The reason the elephants are really attracted here is because when fresh grass grows, fresh grass is higher in protein than mature grass, and the elephants like that. That's why they come for it. After the Moragahakanda project, you see the situation satellite image on the right-hand side, where there are no grasslands showing because the water is filling the entire reservoir. So that has resulted in a drastic reduction in the elephants coming for the elephant gathering. In 2016, 17, and 18, prior to the Moragahakanda project, in the month of September, there were between 350 to 425 elephants coming into Min area, as this data shows. Then in end of 2018, the Moragahakanda project started, and they started releasing water. 2019, the number dropped to 223. 2020, it dropped to 210. In 2021, they released much more water. It came down to 20 elephants. And 2022, from the conservation community and the wildlife department lobbying, they released a bit of water and it increased to 94 elephants. So basically, there is no gathering. Fortunately for Sri Lanka, there have been no tourism also in these 3 years because of COVID and the Easter Sunday bombing. So internationally, people don't realize that there is no gathering. So tourists may still come this year to see the gathering. Now, while there is less elephants and there is no gathering for tourism, the impact on conservation of elephants is quite significant. In 2021, we started noticing that the body condition of the elephants coming, the few elephants coming to Min area was very bad. In this photograph, you will see that the spine, the bones of the hip and the ribs are shown in this, which means that the body condition is very bad. In 2021, when the body condition was bad, what happens is that the females cannot produce enough milk for their calves. And if you don't produce enough milk, the first sign of disaster is calves below 2 years of age dying basically of starvation, because they, up till the age of about 2, they largely depend on mother's milk. And if the mother can't produce enough milk, the calf doesn't have enough milk. And in 2022, we started finding calves dying. On the 30th of June, I found this, I do my research there. So this data is all collected by me. I found this dead calf. When the postmortem was done, I was there. There was not a drop of anything in the calf's stomach or intestines. So the calf died of starvation. There are many females who are in such bad shape that we know calves are dying. We can't find the calves because they all don't die on the grassland. They die in the jungle and we can't find them. So there is a serious conservation problem taking place in Min area right now. In addition to the conservation problem, there is a human problem also happening. This slide shows some radio-collared elephants. Right? Earlier, the elephants were around Min area and Kaudulla reservoirs. Because there is no grasslands in Min area and Kaudulla, the elephants started moving into areas that they have never been before and moving into human habitation, basically. And if elephants start moving into human habitation, we realize that we have huge human-elephant conflict problems. And if you look at the human-elephant conflict data from 2015, onwards, after 2018, when the reservoir started getting filled, the human-elephant conflict numbers have skyrocketed. I don't have the exact data for 2021 and 22, but I know the conflict is much greater than what it was before. So now the government did an irrigation project to have irrigation water for farmers in the Polonnaru area to cultivate. Now, when the elephants don't have food to eat, they start going into human habitation and eating the crops. So what have we done? Have we achieved the objective that we wanted? We have not achieved that objective. Then let's look at the economic loss by tourism. In 2015, there were only about 20% of tourists coming to Sri Lanka who were visiting national parks. In 2018, it came up to almost 50%. 47% of visitors coming to this country were coming into national parks. So a colleague of mine, Mr. Srilal Mittapala from the tourism industry, did a study looking at total earnings from wildlife tourism in Min area. The direct revenue by the wildlife department, indirect revenue by the safari jeep drivers' earnings, and indirect by hotels in the vicinity. And he showed that the Great Elephant Gathering earns $20 million or 3.3 billion rupees, not million, 3.3 billion rupees to the local economy, to the economy of Sri Lanka as a result of the elephant gathering. Now, with the elephant numbers going to 20 or less than 100, it is no longer a feature for people to come and observe. So tourism is going to drop drastically because there are plenty of countries that have 50 to 100 elephants in one location. The attraction was 350 to 400 elephants, right? So now we have destroyed that and we have lost 3,300 million rupees of revenue that the country got from tourism. We have created huge human-elephant conflict in the area. So the agricultural revenue also has gone down because elephants are raiding crops in a big way in those areas. So agricultural revenue also has gone down. So what have we achieved by this? We have spent a colossal amount of money creating the Moragahakanda Dam. Part of it was going to go to the Urulu River. The other part, through an administrative decision, was decided to send to Min area. By sending that water to Min area, we created more agricultural land. But Now these 300, 400 elephants are going and raiding the agricultural land and creating conflict there and reducing the agricultural revenue that the farmers are earning. They are killing people and damaging property, and farmers are killing elephants. So on the conservation side, it's a disaster. On the agricultural side, it is a disaster. Now on the tourism side also, it's a disaster. So the impacts of short-sighted decisions by not taking wildlife biodiversity conservation and taking that into account when you're doing development planning, the result would be, this could be the end of the great elephant gathering of Asia unless the water level in Min area is kept low in the dry season from 2023 onwards. The economic contribution to the economy from the gathering is, like I said, 3,000 million rupees a year. Even if you did agriculture, the additional agriculture that would have been done by this water will not even contribute 100 million rupees a year to the national economy. So from a conservation side, this is a lose-lose situation, right? So, but it creates problems from every side. Filling Min area during the dry season doesn't seem to make economic sense. The fact is, we are storing water in the dry season in Min area. We are not using it for agriculture. We could store it in Moragahakanda and release it when you need it for agriculture. Without doing that, because Moragahakanda is too full, we are releasing it into Min area. The irrigation department seems to feel that their motto is what King Parakramabahu said, that you cannot let even one drop of water go to the sea without using it productively. Productively doesn't mean only agriculture. If you release water from Min area during the dry season so that the economy can earn 3,300 million rupees or more, I think that is a productive use of that water being released. And the irrigation department's argument gets shot down completely, because when you all have seen, when there is high rainfall, don't they open all the sluice gates of all the reservoirs, flooding people downstream and sending all that water into the sea? So what has happened to Parakramabahu's policy at that point? So that means that is not something that is cast in stone. They should be able to release water so that you can earn revenue from the grasslands of Min area, so that it will keep, without keeping it full in the dry season, because it doesn't make economic sense. It also keeping it full and not having the grasslands for the elephants drastically increases the human-elephant conflict due to crop raiding by elephants in the short term. In the long term, the conservation future of this elephant population is seriously threatened, because after about 10 years, the elephant population will reduce to the carrying capacity of that area, which is very much lower than 350 to 400 elephants. And Sri Lanka will lose tourism revenue, agricultural revenue, while elephants and humans will die as a result of escalated human-elephant conflict. This is an example of unsustainable development. It is a lose-lose situation. But why do we do such unsustainable development? That is because people vote and elephants don't. That is one of the main reasons why biodiversity conservation, wildlife conservation is not taken into consideration when we are doing development planning. And from the data that I showed you, most of our development projects, if you analyze it in detail, don't achieve the objectives that we intended to achieve when we did the development project, because we don't take these things. So basically our development is unsustainable. Secondly, if we continue depleting our biodiversity and wildlife, we will reduce the service provision of ecosystems, and then development once again will start declining, which means there will be no sustainable development in Sri Lanka. So this clearly elaborates, because of time is short, I have to rush through these things. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you really want to do development in a country, you need to take biodiversity conservation into consideration, which includes wildlife conservation. And that has to be internalized or integrated into the development plans of development sectors, because each one is dependent on the other. It's a symbiotic relationship between the two. So until the time that the government, I think the private sector in Sri Lanka understands this much better than the government. The government, not that they don't understand it, they don't want to understand it, is my view. because they think what they want to do, because they are development sectors, they can do what they want without realizing this. Because most government activities, they look at it on the short term because of political expediency. And in the long term, Sri Lanka is going to have an unsustainable development system. So if we want to stop that, I think we have to start integrating biodiversity conservation and wildlife conservation into the development planning process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a wonderful talk about how important sustainable development is for the development of our country, as well as how important they are in the context of conservation of wildlife. Thank you very much, sir. So next we'll have the discussion and the question and answer session at the end of the next speaker's talk. So moving on, so the action of businesses play a crucial role in the quest for sustainable development, not just because their social and environmental impacts, but also because of their transformative and financial power. So these conservation efforts that are led by these businesses inspire initiatives and help support biodiversity. So joining with us today is our next speaker, Ms. Charni Vijayasinghe. Ms. Charni Vijayasinghe is a senior executive at Mars Intimates. She has 7 years of experience in the fields of environmental sustainability in the apparel industry, ranging from environmental management to biodiversity conservation. She has obtained her bachelor's degree in environmental conservation and management from the University of Kelaniya, and also completed a master's degree in business administration from the University of West London. Ms. Charni, please feel free to start the presentation. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Asna. Thank you very much for inviting me. And also, thank you very much, ZooNet Society, for inviting me. Asna, can you see my screen?
The video is visible, but not the screen yet.
Okay, wait a moment.
Okay.
I think you can see it, right?
Yes, now it's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me for the today's session. And also, I'm going to explain to you how MAs support wildlife conservation and contributes to the achieving UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I think all of you know what is MAs. So if I give you a brief introduction, MAs is the largest apparel tech company in South Asia. It's among the most recognized and designed to deliver solution providers in apparel and textile manufacturing. So MAs is home to a community of over 118,000 employees around the world, and MAs has 361 operations around the globe, and also we span across 17 countries with established design locations and placed key style centers across the world. So over 35 years in our operations, MS has gained global recognition for its ethical and sustainable working environment and for the organization's tireless effort in social development and women empowerment. So MS has identified that we need a change. So if I explain to you why we need a change, so all of you also know that in apparel industry, so this apparel industry has been labeled as one of the biggest polluter in globally. So with issues such as post-consumer waste management and also degradation of biodiversity and higher water consumption and water pollution spanning across supply chain, manufacturing, and also consumer usage. So as I mentioned in this presentation, in 2020 alone, as an estimated 18.6 million tons of clothes ended up in landfilling. And also in 2018, the global apparel industry produced 2.1 billion of greenhouse gas emission, and it counts for 4% of the global total. And so not only that, about 60% of material made into clothing is plastic, which includes polyester, nylon, acrylic, and different textile materials. Every time all of us wash this synthetic fabric, they shed microplastic, which will release into the land or ocean. And also cotton, which is the most common natural fiber that we use in apparel industry, is a very thirsty crop actually. So it requires around 2,700 liters of water for producing a one cotton shirt, which will be anyway can use if a person drinks 2.5 years. So we have identified as an industry, we need a change. And there are other issues like, as I mentioned here, the Bangladesh garment worker to earn what the CEO from one of the top 5 fashion brands earn in 4 days. It will take lifetime for this employee. So with coming from the community side, also from environmental side, there is a need that we should consider. So because of that, MAS has identified this need, and they have pledged to take actions for this. So that's why we have released this, we have made this commitment for the plan for change. So our company efforts to drive positive impact and outline in the MS plan for change. So the plan for change is a commitment to inspire sustainable change within MS business among its consumers, customers, people, communities, and also the planet at large. So it has 3 main categories: product change for good, life change for good, and our planet change for good. So I will explain in these 3 categories how we address and how we support achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So the product change for good category, so our target is to 50% revenue generated through sustainable products by 2025. First one is innovate and disrupt. So we innovate and disrupt to create products that can last longer, be good for the wearer, and also it's recycled after use. So this innovate and disrupt goal is also support the activities that we are doing, also support for the UN SDG number 12 and 14, mainly the responsible consumption and production, and also the life below water. Exploration into alternative synthetic dye stuff and enables us to natural dyes in the coloration process will help to achieve this life below water. It reduces our negative impacts. So the next one is source sustainability. We source raw materials that are organic, recycled, and natural, and also responsible sourced. So as I explained earlier, the global supply chains have a very historic negative impact and very negative reputation of contributing to the loss of the biodiversity. So business must work towards change the suppliers and the value chain partners to create sustainable sourcing options and also transparent supply chain. So with that, we have committed to source sustainably. And I think you also have heard about this PET bottle recycle project, and these are the projects that we comes under this category. So we have used 21 million PET bottles recycled into polyester yarns and or fabrics in 2020. So this project, this one is also support UN SDG responsible consumptions and production. The last one is the pioneer circularity at scale. So we will close the loop by using post-consumer waste to make new products. So we are doing this by weaving the life cycle of our products we manufacture, and also it comes to the lens of logistics, supply chain, material, technology, and all this. But when it comes to this product change for good pillar that we have committed, we understood that we can't do this alone. We need to partnership with other partners, suppliers, consumers, and everyone to achieve this target. So as an overall, this pillar support this responsible production and consumption and production goal, and also life below water and the partnership for the goals, goal number 17. So the next one commitment that we have included into our plan for change is life change for good. So the first one is empowering women. So we empower women to the better to achieve more. So we have launched our Women Go Beyond empowerment program in 23. So with last around nearly 20 years, we have done different activities to empowering women, and also it has raised the standards of apparel industry in Sri Lanka, and focused empowering women and building gender equality within the business, and align the UN Women Empowerment Principles and also the Sustainable Development Goals, gender equality and reduce inequalities. The next one is the meaningful employment. So we help employees to improve their well-being and better balance of life and work. So MS provide on-site and off-site childcare facilities across the group, and we have 20 childcare facilities at the moment running. So, and also we collaborate with the authorize and train experience institution for the staff, and also we centralize group policy for flexible working. So these are supporting for the meaningful employment, and also work. It's again support for the no poverty and zero hunger, and also good health and well-being in SDGs. The next one is world-class workplace. So as MAs, we promote diversity, inclusion, and freedom of expression for all employees, with emphasis of the persons with disabilities. So at present, MAS employs more than 380 persons with disabilities. It's ranging from vision, speech, hearing, and different other disabilities. Sorry. So we continue to partner with the Center for Disabilities in Faculty of Medicine, University of Kelaniya, to support these employees also. The last one is trying communities. We support communities around us to develop and create positive change. So far, we have done different activities engaging with the community with last 35 years. So these activities mainly range from 6 categories: education, environmental initiatives, health, local connects, and also nation mindsets, and also sports. So with this life change for good, we have addressed and we are supporting for the UN SDGs, as mentioned here: quality education, zero hunger, no poverty, and different other UN SDGs. With this, our plan for change, lives change for good category. So the third one is our planet change for good. So we have 5 commitments for this, but out of these 5 commitments, first one is the limit emissions and transform waste, responsible chemical usage, and safeguard water. So I will explain them later, because the most important thing here I'm going to explain you today is champion biodiversity. So you might think that how biodiversity considered in our apparel industry. So we all should understand that when accounting for the long-term business survival, one usually doesn't consider the heavy cost to biodiversity and nature, especially on planet and wildlife. But what we may not realize is that business itself needs natural life cycles to survive and thrive. As Dr. Sumit explains, we can't survive without the balancing ecosystems. So the protecting biodiversity, pollination, regeneration, filtration, and all other natural life cycles of planets and animals ensures the business can enjoy long and healthy lives. So the process of manufacturing garments depend on the agriculture and natural yarns and fabrics. So we disrupt our ecosystems, and the resulting imbalance causes chaos in food chains, which negatively impacts our industry. So because of that, we are understanding this imbalanced environment will also cause a huge impact on the industry. We have made commitments to restore and protect 100 times of the area occupied by MAS by 2025. So we have engaged different methods for that: restoration, afforestation, invasive species removal, and analog forestry and conservation practices. So far, as MAS, we have support and we have take actions for the restoration and conservation of around 9,000 acres of habitat. So, and also with this champion biodiversity pillar, we are supporting UN SDG of life on land and also life below water. So this is one of the main projects we started in 2022. It's a wildlife conservation project. We started in Kenya. So MAS partnered with the Wildlife Foundation in Kenya to conserve 6,250 acres of the Nairobi National Park wildlife dispersal area. So this conservancy model utilize both monetary and non-monetary incentives to encourage landowners and local communities for them to keep land unfenced for wildlife and livestock to move freely in outskirt lands of the national park. So we all know that this wildlife will not remain all the time within the national park. So they will move out from the national park, especially in rainy season. So this project support to conserve this area. So we coupled with this initiative to raise awareness and community-based conservation, and also we placed community rangers to mitigate human-wildlife conflict, train youth and women on topics such as beekeeping, biogas, and also promoting the use of technology in wildlife conservation. So these lands are mainly in the Machakos and Kajiado counties. So they are owned by the indigenous Maasai community. So we have seen that there are a lot of benefits by doing these projects. So it increased the community acceptance of any wildlife conservation measures on their land and in their neighboring areas. So and also this one consequently promotes the thriving of wildlife. So also poaching activities and the human retaliation against the lions and other predators also reduce as the communities will accept that they are also getting the incentives and they are getting these monetary funds because of the conserving this wildlife. So they are also support for the wildlife existence in their private lands. And also this project provide educational opportunities for the families, because the incentives that we are providing them is mainly focused on the 3 semesters of the students. So we have identified that the 85% of the incentives that we are providing them will be used for the educational purposes, because it starts with the semester starting. So this is one of the biggest project that we started in 2022, targeting the wildlife conservation. So, and also there's another project that we have done. It's a in-situ turtle conservation project in Panama area. We have partnered with Wildlife and Ocean Resource Conservation Society for doing this project. So all of you know that turtles face high level of threat to their existence due to the habitat they occupy and their behavioral patterns. Threats like killed as bycatch of during fish activities, and also illegal poaching of the eggs and illegal hunting of the adults, and also the predation of eggs and hatchlings by animals. There are a lot of threats that they are facing. So we have initiated this in-situ turtle conservation project in Panama area, so that we could be able to conserve, we have to be able to protect 102 nests from 2020 October to 21 October to 2021 to June. Within this period, we could be able to protect 102 turtle nests. This nest belongs to 66 olive ridley nests were there, and also 30 green turtle nests and 6 logger-headed turtle nests were there. So out of all, by protecting all these 102 nests, we could be able to safely release 11,435 hatchlings to the ocean. So this project's not, we didn't end this project last year. We continue this project with time. So with this project, we are engaging with the 2 other partners, Commercial Bank and also DEMO, to conserve 17 acres area, 17 kilometers land beach area by doing this project. And also we partner with University of Peradeniya to initiate a research component for this project, and it's also happening now. So I will move to the next project that we have started. So this is the project that we recently started, leopard conservation project. So we are doing this in Eastern Sinharaj area. So we have noticed that the survival of leopards in Sri Lanka is threatened due to the habitat loss, anthropogenic reasons, and different other reasons. So we partnered with Wildlife Gold Conservation Society to do this project. And with this project, there's a research component is also combined with that, because we have understood that the main obstacle that facing in doing a better conservation project is that related to leopard is that lack of information about their existence and their population, the habitat outside of the national parks. So in this project, we are also engaging with state workers in the Eastern Singharaja area and working with them to make people aware and also educate, correct their livestock. And also we monitor and do a research to identify their leopard population in Eastern Singharaja area. So we initiated this project last year. So it's in the initial stage now, but targeting on doing it for a few years to see the success. The next one is invasive species removal. So the spread of invasive species in our national parks, it has become a huge threat to the wildlife. So the first project that we did started in 2017 from Udawalawa National Park. So so this project is mainly targeted on removing lantana, what we call gandapana plants from the national park. So from 2017 to these 5 years, we are removing the invasive lantana plants and also maintaining that status, continuously removing the regrowth. So this also give a benefit to reduce the wildlife elephant conflicts, because there is some issue that the elephants doesn't have enough food and there's a food shortage inside the national park because there isn't the limited, their food sources have been limited because of this invasive species. So there's scarcity and also human elephant that also encourage the human elephant conflict. So this project we are doing for the last 5 years. And the next project that we started about invasive removal is Agada invasive removal from the Mineri National Park. So that one also support to the wildlife and also to ecotourism also, because it support for the grazing, as Dr. Pilapiti explained, it's also support, provide food for the elephant. And we have also done this Kalapuandara removal project from Bundara National Park. And also we started removing Ulex plant from the Horton Plains National Park this year. So these are the few projects that we did under invasive species removal category. This is another project that we did in mangrove habitat restoration. So we have partnered with the local grassroots level environmental organization called Turuliya Arana in order to carry out this conservation activity. So the project was planned with the two main components, initial enrichment and restoration and long-term maintenance until the restored areas become self-sustaining. So with this project, we have introduced a conservation program that becomes self-sustaining after the end of the project. So we provide awareness and share knowledge to the surrounding community to prevent and damage to the prevent the damage to the ecosystem, and also involve them for the conservation programs, and also support their ecotourism and create new opportunities to the local supporting, especially for the volunteer tourism programs also. So this project started in 2017, and so far this has become a self-sustaining project because this grassroots organization is doing and continuing this project with the support of different other organizations, different other industries, and also volunteers who are coming from for the tourism related volunteers, like volunteer tourism, that you all know, that volunteer tourism activities, and also support for the ecotourism, so that this project has become a self-sustaining one now. So also we have done some reforestation activities, partnering with forest department and also different other organizations. These are not just go and planting trees and coming back. These are long-term projects with the maintenance of the plants, that until we ensure that they can self-sustain, that they can self-survive. Until then, we maintain these sites. It's not just go there, plant few plants and coming back. The other one is primary forest conservation. So we have started this project in protecting the Singharaja buffer zone conservation. So to protect privately owned lands that are not yet covered under to purchase these lands and hold them under trust for conservation reasons. So this land will not be utilized for any purpose, and we will not be planting any plants or anything like that. We will conserve them in the pristine condition, helping to protect the buffer zone of the island's last primary tropical forest, rainforest Ringharajan. So these are some of the projects that MS Intimates has done last few years, and we are continuing to do these such projects. So other than this champion biodiversity, as I explained to you, they are also committing for other four other pillars in plan for change, planet change for good category. So one of them is the committed to science-based target initiative to on emission reductions. So in line with science-based targets, we have pledged to reduce absolute emission from 25% to by 2025. So we are working on this by reducing our absolute emission. And also the other one is that we are also working to reduce our energy and emission footprints. So Sri Lanka's largest multi-site 1 million square feet generate 21.85 megawatts of electricity. So it's enough to power 14,000 homes. So these projects are also going on. This will also support climate actions, the UN UN Sustainable Development Goals 30 climate action, and also other UN SDGs related to environment. And also we reuse, repurpose, and recycle the waste we generate. So we have 90% of our waste was diverted from the landfilling. So all MS facilities, so MS Intimates have already achieved no single-use plastic status. So these are some activities that we are doing in our sustainability plan for change pillar. So we have done this oceans trainer. You might have heard about this earlier. So we have piloted this oceans trainer in Sri Lanka. So it has already been between 2020 to 2021 August, we have prevented 60,000 kilograms of waste from reaching out ocean. So we also working towards being zero toxic in our products and processes. So MS has partnered with this CDHC level 1 status we have achieved. And also we are taking actions for reducing our water consumption and also the negative impacts to our communities related to water usage. So these are the things that I wanted to share with you, that what we have committed for contributing to and supporting to achieve UN Sustainable Development Goals, and also for the wildlife conservation. So I understand that with today, like with all these difficulties facing by the normal community, so the average person might be thinking that survival, how to feed their families and educate their children, they may not be able to prioritize the call to actions and protecting our natural ecosystems and wildlife. So this is why it's up to us as organizations to take on the responsibility to drive this message forward and create collaborative actions toward impactful change. So that's why this plan for change is targeting. This plan for change is the main target of this is that. So take actions, collaborate with others for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Charni. That was really interesting and very helpful. So this has shown us how business communities perceives business communities at large, how they perceive nature conservation issues and how they work towards solving them. So thank you very much. So the panel is open for discussion. If anybody has questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat box. So while they do that, there are some few questions that I hope to share with you so that we can have an integrated discussion. So when we consider sustainable development and wildlife conservation, one of the biggest issues that, like I said at the introduction, is the COVID-19 pandemic. So how does that? So what how can we connect that to sustainable development, and how can we address these issues to prevent such zoonotic spillover in future as well. So what are your views on that? I would like to have a discussion.
You're asking me, are you?
Yes, sir. Sure.
Okay. See, now if you go now, while there are a few disputes as to what was the cause of COVID, predominance of the evidence shows that it was from the wet markets of China, where they trade in wildlife meat. So the only way now, even in Sri Lanka, if it could happen in China, zoonotic diseases can be transferred into human society even in Sri Lanka, because we have wildlife, we have humans. The only way zoonotic diseases can be transferred from an animal to a human is through direct contact by consumption, right? And I have been using the COVID situation to argue with people, saying that if we stop eating bushmeat, you eliminate the link between humans and don't consume, right? Then there is that the zoonotic disease can get transferred from an animal to a human. The only way of transferring, like what happened in China also, is the fact that they were consuming wild meat. So if you want to stop that in Sri Lanka, it's a very simple thing. If Sri Lankan society understands this and we stop consuming bush meat or wild meat, poached meat, or better word, it's a Sinhala word that we call dadamas. If we don't consume that, there is no chance of zoonotic disease getting from an animal to humans. The other thing that we have to be worried about, the other mechanism of zoonotic diseases getting into human society, is when we release domestic cattle into national parks for grazing. When you release domestic animals into a national park where there is wildlife, so that they can go and graze, you're putting domestic cattle and buffalo in contact with wild animals. That's also another way of getting domestic diseases into the wildlife population, or getting wildlife diseases into the domestic population. When we consume meat, like beef and all is consumed by humans legally, then there is a chance of zoonotic diseases coming into us. So if we stop the contact between domestic animals and wild animals, and we as humans stop consuming domestic meat, the probability of a zoonotic disease like what happened is very slim, or almost nothing. So it's all up to us. If we are committed enough to stop eating bushmeat, we can solve this problem and stop releasing cattle into national parks. Then it can be reduced. That's the best. I think that is the best way to reduce zoonotic diseases from coming into human society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That was really important for us to think about and keep in mind how much of an impact that has on our economy, health, and all the related aspects. So, sir, continuing from your presentation, so I'd like to talk about how we can look at the human-elephant conflict and address them in a more sustainable manner for both humans and elephants as well.
The human conflict, unfortunately, Sri Lanka has been using a certain conceptual model to try to deal with the conflict. In the answering time, it's very little, so I'll try to, I can give you a complete lecture on human-elephant conflict and what the problems we are having and why it happened. But in a nutshell, in 1959, Sri Lanka appointed a committee to come up with a plan to manage the human-elephant conflict in Sri Lanka. And until 2020, it is that plan that we have been trying to implement. The The plan being, elephants should be confined to wildlife department protected areas. So we do elephant drives and chase elephant in wildlife protected areas, electric fence around. What we haven't realized is all wildlife department protected areas are surrounded by forest department protected areas. We have forgotten that the elephant doesn't understand human-made administrative boundaries. Elephant doesn't understand the wildlife department boundaries, the maximum I can go to. Elephants travel on the ecological boundary. Where there is food, the elephants will go to. So about 70% of our electric fences that have been, we have 4,500 kilometers of fencing in Sri Lanka. 70 to 80% of that fencing is between forest department land and wildlife department land. When the elephant comes to that fence, it sees food on both sides because it's jungle on both sides. So it breaks that fence. There is nothing to stop the elephant from going into forest department land and thereafter going into development areas. So the fundamental difference in 2020, the former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa appointed a presidential committee to come up with a human-elephant conflict mitigation action plan. That committee was chaired by Dr. Prithviraj Fernando. I was a member of that committee. It had various different stakeholders. For the first time, we came up with a plan based on science, not on political needs. Very simply, if there is adequate contiguous forest in areas, when I mean by adequate contiguous forest, if there is adequate forest to support a large elephant population, all electric fences have to be relocated from administrative boundaries of wildlife department land to the ecological boundary. The ecological boundaries are forest and development starts. The elephant understands that boundary, right? So all the fences have to be relocated to the ecological boundary. It shouldn't matter. Electric fence is to keep humans and elephants separate. So it shouldn't matter whether the boundary belongs to forest department, wildlife department, Mahavali Authority, other state forests, or even private forests. It should be relocated to the boundary where the ecology changes. Those are fences that we know as inclusive fences. We are trying to include elephants on the forest side of the fence. But there are many parts of Sri Lanka, like the northwestern province, north central province, southern province, eastern province, where there isn't adequate forests because we have, due to unplanned or poorly planned development, we have fragmented forest. So the ecological boundary is the boundary of the forest patch. The forest patches are too small to support the elephant population. So putting fences around the ecological boundary there doesn't make sense. So in areas where there isn't adequate contiguous forests or where there is forest patches, then we have to protect what you need to protect. What do we need to protect? We need to protect villages so that elephants won't come into the village at night. We need to protect paddy fields and agriculture to prevent elephants from raiding crops. So in those areas, we do what we call exclusion fencing, where we try to fence the village, you fence the paddy field or the paddy tract to prevent elephants from coming in there. But they can roam from one forest patch to the other. So this was the plan. In a nutshell, this was the plan that has been given to the president in December 2020. This plan is based on models of village fences, that there are about 60 village fences that have been constructed by an organization known as the Center for Conservation and Research. Organization has done it on a pilot basis and it has been pretty successful. If you go and talk to the villagers in the Galgamu area in northwestern province and north central province, north central province, Anuradhapura district, you have several of these, about 50 to 60 of these fences has been very successful. Then there is about 40 paddy field fences around the paddy tract. Generally in one paddy tract, there are about 40-50 farmers working there. So you put it around the periphery. It is a seasonal fence. You erect the fence just before the cultivation. Once you harvest the crop, the next day you remove the fence because you are allowing elephants to come and eat the crop residue. Because once you harvest the crop, the farmers don't need the residue. What we call in Sinhala ipanal, to come and eat the ipanal. Right? That model also has been working very successfully. Even though this model plan was given to the former president in December 2020, Unfortunately, it was not the plan that the president wanted. He wanted something else. We didn't do that. We did what was scientifically right. Therefore, it was not implemented. So in 2022 October, when the current government spoke to me about what to do, I said, no more plans are needed. You need to implement the existing plan that was done in 2020. And in November 2022, the current president appointed a presidential committee with the mandate to oversee and coordinate the implementation, because a committee can't do implementation. There are different agencies doing implementation. The fences on the ecological boundary has to be done by the wildlife department. Fences around villages should not be done by the wildlife department. It should be done by an agency that has regular contact with villages, which is who has the most amount of contact. It's the Grama Niladhari network, which is the divisional secretaries. So the divisional secretariat should get involved with the community, building those fences. The community has to maintain those fences. And the agrarian development department, who is doing paddy fields in this country, has to work with the paddy farmers to do paddy field fencing. That model is now going to be implemented. Unfortunately, Sri Lanka, like we do everything, in November, the committee was appointed, but no funding was allocated in the November budget because it was too late to allocate funding. So in 2023, we are going to try to focus on the Kurunagal and Anuradhapura districts, because there are some World Bank, Asian Development Bank project where we can get some funding to demonstrate this concept. And if it works, then in the 2024 budget, we will be requesting money to expand it nationwide. That is the model that will work. That is the model that we have to go for. So I said it very shortly. I can give you a 1-hour presentation about the rationale, how we came to that, but because of time, I'll just give you in a nutshell. That is the model that we have to go for to try to make this successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm sure that many of the audience have a number of questions. Please unmute yourself and you can ask the questions. Thank you.
I am Gihan Dhanayaka from Department of Zoology, Open University. I want to raise one question to Dr. Pilapitiya regarding actually, according to the present economic crisis, poaching and also illegal wildlife trade and wildlife trafficking, those aspects, those things will increase definitely according to the present crisis. So how we can address these challenges in future? Pretty sure that you mentioned that implementation is the main thing we should focus on. So rather than that, what are the other conservation aspects we can focus on to address these kind of?
See, poaching with the current condition now, I live in Tisamaharama, right? And a kilo of venison is 800 rupees in Tisamaharama area, whereas a kilo of chicken is 1,200 rupees. So obviously the incentive is to do more poaching. The only way to stop it is it's a bit of a long-term thing, creating awareness among societies that communities that we should not be doing it. But the faster way of doing it is the Wildlife Conservation Department has to increase patrolling inside wildlife protected areas to prevent poaching, because most of the poaching happens inside wildlife protected areas. So if the Wildlife Department is able to increase their patrolling in these areas, that would help reduce the poaching, because the parks that are able to do regular patrolling, poachers are getting caught, and then when poachers start getting caught and get charged, the demand for it goes down a little bit. Unfortunately, the resources provided to the Wildlife Department under this economy. So to do patrolling, you have to go in a vehicle to a certain point in a park and then go on foot. Some parks, some Wildlife Department protected areas, the managers are having problems with not having adequate funds for fuel. So unfortunately, this is going to encourage more poaching. So in the short term, it is economic crisis. But in the longer term, there are countries that have been working with the local communities, because globally, you cannot save a wildlife protected area unless the local community that lives adjacent to the wildlife protected area or is also a beneficiary of wildlife conservation. Unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, other than jeep drivers getting some income, there is no mechanism for the wildlife, the communities that live surrounding wildlife protected areas to get any economic benefit from wildlife. Countries like Nepal, for example, they have allocated 35% of the park revenue to each park has got what they call a buffer zone fund. That fund, 35% of the park revenue goes to that buffer zone fund. The buffer zone fund is managed by the buffer zone community, not by the government, by the community. And the community can use that. There is some guidelines on what they can use it for, but largely for development of the community. When you do that, you create a dependency between the protected area and the buffer zone community. Because the buffer zone community realizes if there are no animals, people won't come to the protected area. There will be no tourism, so then there will be less revenue for the buffer zone fund. So then the buffer zone community becomes one of the biggest advocates in protecting wildlife and preventing poaching and illegal trafficking. So that type of model, Sri Lanka has to go to that type of model. However, our government seems to be still very resistant to do that, unless we try to change the way we think. And we seem to think in Sri Lanka that it is only the Wildlife Conservation Department who can do protection. I don't agree with that. Wildlife Conservation Department is the main agency to do protection, but we have to try to involve communities and the public also in that role. If we start doing that, and the communities adjacent to protected areas, because they are the ones who are involved in poaching, and even if there's commercial poaching, they are the ones who have, the commercial operator has to get local communities to participate. You can then reduce the local community interest in getting involved in activities like that. So we have to go to a point where we can have some economic benefit to local communities from wildlife tourism, even human-elephant conflict. Elephants are a huge attraction for tourism. Why can't we have a certain percentage of tourism revenue going to directly fund problems and to solve problems that communities that are facing human-elephant conflict? We don't do things like that. We get money from elsewhere. So we have to start building those links. And those partnerships are not built, we will have huge problems in trying to prevent illegal wildlife trafficking and poaching. So we need to work hard towards building those partnerships with local communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
I also have a question to Ms. Charani. So I also read an interesting project about reforestation, particularly about aerial reforestation of the real reforestation. So I'd like to ask you to talk about this, Isan, because it seemed really interesting.
Thank you, Asna. So it's a kind of pilot project we run partnering with University of Peradeniya and also with the partnering with Sri Lankan Air Force. So as a pilot project, it was a very successful project, but we have done some different projects of the partnering with them in Lahugala area and restoration. It is mainly for the difficult areas which is not possible to go and plant the species. So after the pilot project, we have done few other projects. So we have seen the success around 45% of seedlings that we have dropped have started growing. So in the adverse environmental conditions, and also when it is difficult to reach that areas that we can't plant or something like that, we can use this preparing seed bombs and throwing them to locations where they can plant by themselves. So it's not, we all the time don't need to use an aircraft or something like that, because it's also generate emission. But we can use that seed bombs to plant, disperse seeds and support them to plant in the rainy season by doing this project. It's actually started as a pilot project to find out this method.
Thank you very much, Ms. Charlie. Also, it's interesting to see how important the carbon footprint is for the conservation, and how important, how conscious the business are on thinking about all this. And also, I would like to ask Ms. Charlie another question. So, what are some of the main issues that you identified in leopard conservation, the leopard conservation projects? What are the main threats that the leopards are facing in this project?
Yes. So Asna, it's an initial project that we started end of last year. So the main part of this project is to identify what are the main threats that they are facing. I know that they are facing leopards in Sri Lanka mainly facing snaring and also poaching and activities, and also poisoning to protect their livestock and activities like that. So what we have understood is that there are lack of scientific information about this leopard outside of the national park. We have records in Yala National Park. We have records about population and their dispersal and also their habitat in Vilpattu National Park. But it is needed to find out, and it is needed to do a project to identify outside the national park how is their population and what are their actual threats that they are facing, and what is their habitat, what is their food sources, things like that. So as a part of this, we started this project in Eastern Sinharaj area. But also I know that there are different other organizations also committing Wildlife and Nature Protection Society and different other organizations started doing these projects to do a research and identify the population of leopards around Sri Lanka. So this is also supporting that part. We are targeting on this Eastern Sinharaj area. So what we have found, like since this is initial stage, I can't give you a proper idea about what are the threats that they are facing in this specific area. But the common practices, the common threats that they are facing are snaring, and also people poison them to protect their livestock, and also and the conflicts that are happening because people don't understand and don't understand how we coexist with this species. So I don't have a specific answer for this question for what we have found so far because it's in the initial stage. I will let you know after we have done it at least more than 1 year to finding out that what's the research, the answers that we have found out.
Thank you very much, Ms. Charlie.
Asna, there is something I would like to add to Charuni's comments.
Sure.
See, in the hill country, in the plantation areas, there is quite a lot of leopard snaring going on. Many leopards are getting caught to snares, and actually one of the problems is that the forest areas that the leopards were in on the mountain ridges are little by little decreasing because we are opening up the forests for development. So the more we keep opening up the forests, there is less prey for the leopards in the mountain ridges. So when they have not enough prey for them, because of the reduction in forest cover as well as poaching, goes back to the poaching issue, because people are poaching wild boar and things like the deer and wild boar. When the leopards don't have enough prey, they come into tea estates because dogs are very easy prey for them. So they get caught in snares because many of the snares are not laid for leopards. They are laid for wild boar and all to prevent them coming and destroying agriculture. But since the leopards are coming into where the line rooms are on tea plantations so that they can catch dogs, they get caught in these snares. So again, it goes back to deforestation as well as poaching that results in these snarings. So as long as we keep doing that, we are going to, our leopard population outside protected areas are going to be under severe threat. Thank you.
Yes, it's really clear that all of these issues actually circulate back to poaching and wildlife crimes and our negligence in caring for these animals. Yes.
Yes, one thing, since
yes.
everything is going back to poaching. If mind that I am never going to ever eat bushmeat, you will be helping. If you find friends, I know when I was also young at one point, when we go with friends, somebody wants to, it's we Sri Lankans who go to a national park to see wildlife, come out of the park and go and ask somebody, if we start if we stop the demand for it, poaching will reduce. If there is no demand, people are not going to poach. So each one of us has a role to play. We have to make up our minds. We are not going to eat any bushmeat, and we should try to influence all our friends not to do that. If we can do that, I think we are helping a lot. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Hope any more audience questions, please unmute and you can ask the questions from our panelists.
Yes, Asna, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, sure, sir.
Yes, yes, I'm in the Department of Zoology of Open University. Asna, that in this discussion, we see a lot of companies are doing a lot of environment-friendly projects and conservation projects, but we see a lot of projects are diluting with time, and the sustainability is very less. In my point is that because the sustainability part, we are designing the project, the sustainability part, we are not recognized. That's why most of the projects tone down or the diluting, and some of the things, the first or second year, we get a lot of data and the conservation things, but the long-term run, the conservation effects and the money we spend for those projects are not sustainably utilized in the country. In my point, if the expert can comment on that one, it's my point. Yes,
I think you're absolutely right. Not only in some private sector projects, most government projects are not sustainable. I have been working in the World Bank for many years, and I have worked in many countries. But see, many of the, particularly, it's not a unique problem to Sri Lanka. It's a problem to most South Asian countries. But it is, I think, very bad in Sri Lanka that we never focus on sustenance. I mean, the human resources and financial resources after a project is over, to continue that on the long term. So that's a serious issue. And most of our development projects, particularly government development projects, my familiarity is more with government development projects than the private sector. And the government development projects are the ones that utilize a huge amount of money in doing those projects. I don't think we are getting the benefits that we thought we will get before we started the project. If we are not getting the benefits that we thought we will get before we started the project, that means it's not a sustainable project. So it's a serious issue. The solution, I don't really know, unless the government starts having accountability. When there is no accountability, you can do a project. If it is not sustainable, who cares? During the period you did it, it worked. After that, nobody cares about it. As long as you have unaccountability, sustainability will be a problem. If there is accountability, then sustainability will improve. So that's the only solution I see. Thanks.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Dr. Pilibidi. And also, my point is that we are not recognize the stakeholders. What are the stakeholders that the sustainability and the projects are the future plans? In my point that we are not identify the suitable stakeholders for the projects. Yes, maybe that the major reason for that.
Yeah, that is very true. That's why
yes,
you have to make the community beneficiaries of that wildlife. Then they will, because then the incentive for them to do something to wildlife that will create conservation problems will reduce, because they are also beneficiaries. Right now, the local community hardly gets any benefit from wildlife parks. So that creates more incentives for them to have unsustainable, do activities that will make conservation that will hamper conservation. Similarly, all other projects. Even when I was saying that the development sectors don't get the stakeholders like the conservation agencies and the conservation community involved when they are planning a project. You are absolutely right that we need to get stakeholders. All the stake participation should continue even during implementation and beyond. That will make projects sustainable. Thank you, Samin. That's a very valid point you raised.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. So I think when we consider the pillars of sustainability, that is economic, social, and environment, we often support these. Most of our policies support only one pillar at the cost of the other pillars. So I think it's very important that we keep all of the three, the economic, social, and environment pillars in mind when we talk about sustainable development. Yes. Any more questions?
That's very true.
Yes.
And I'm Subhadra here, Dr. Pilapit here. Your talk is very interesting, and it is amazing the way you produce data logically to prove things. And it's very interesting the way you use the movement of elephants into the Minneria National Park. And we are very lucky to hear your talk today. And thank you so much. And Charuni, we are happy to see young people like you involved effectively in conservation projects. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And today's talk is very useful.
Thank you, Subhadra.
Thank you, Subhadra.
Thank you, Subhadra Madam, for that wonderful, to echoing all of our thanks as well. So if there is any more questions, we could have it, or we could end the presentation. Okay, so I think the conservation efforts so far are successful because of this innovative partnership, I think. So a network of societies, the civil, network of societies who talk about their advocacy and the challenges that they face has helped us to learn from that. And also the engagement with the academics has helped us to get a better understanding of the subject matter and the far-fetching impacts on everything. So I think it's a combination of all of this that has made conservation efforts and sustainable development more a possibility. So I really want to call everyone to break the barriers and boundaries if we want to champion something. So all the entities that are mentioned in sustainable development matter. So the scientists, the researchers, the finance sector, the government, all of them must come together to create this vast network so that our voices can make a difference. So thank you so much everyone for attending this presentation. And it was a great honor to be able to moderate this event and be part of this discussion. Also a special thanks to our wonderful panelists today, Dr. Sumit Pilapitiya and Ms. Charni Vijayasinghe. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being here with us today. So I think it's really illuminating how deeply people care about wildlife and about nature, and how people sort of commit to making this world a better place for animals and humans. So also thank you again to the ZooNet Society for including this as an associated event. And I really appreciate the huge support. Thank you, Dr. Pilapitiya and Ms. Charni Vijayasinghe. Thank you very much. And thank you again to all of our audience. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Asna. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, let's end the meeting, I hope. So I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again, everyone. Okay, thank you very much.